Rajesh Sharma, a respected businessman, Sunita, his devoted wife, Priya, her bright teenage daughter, and Meera, Priya's childhood best friend. On the surface, they were ordinary people living in a quiet Indian neighborhood. But behind closed doors, their lives were bound by a dark secret, a forbidden affair that would end in betrayal, violence, and a shocking murder. This is the chilling story of how a stepfather's obsession and a best friend's silence led to the death of an innocent girl. In the quiet city of Pune, where neighbors often knew each other's routines and families gathered for evening tea on balconies, the Sharma household looked almost picture-perfect. Their modest two-story home was painted cream and always kept neat, with flower pots arranged carefully by the entrance. Rajesh Sharma, the head of the family, was a man who commanded respect in the community. He ran a small but successful business that supplied electrical goods, and people admired his discipline and work ethic. He was often the one offering advice to neighbors about finances or giving donations during temple festivals. To outsiders, Rajesh appeared to be the ideal father and husband. Inside the home, his second wife Sunita played the role of a devoted homemaker. She was gentle, soft-spoken, and carried herself with quiet dignity. Having been widowed at a young age, Sunita's life had been full of struggle before marrying Rajesh. People praised her good fortune for finding stability with him. She was grateful for the security he provided and tried to keep the household in harmony. Her daughter from her first marriage, Priya, was at the center of her world. Sunita often believed that marrying Rajesh had been the best decision for Priya's future, ensuring the girl would grow up with a father figure and a stable home. Priya, at 16, was bright, ambitious, and a little stubborn. She loved reading mystery novels, spent hours sketching in her notebooks, and often helped her mother with chores. At school, she performed well, and her teachers admired her curiosity. Among friends, she was confident and cheerful, the kind of person others trusted with their secrets. Yet at home, Priya sometimes felt a sense of distance from her stepfather. Rajesh treated her politely in front of her mother, but there was always a barrier that kept their relationship from feeling genuine. He controlled the rules of the house, from how late Priya could stay out to what subjects she should focus on in school. His decisions were rarely open for discussion, and though Sunita occasionally tried to soften his rigidity, she rarely challenged him outright. To the neighbors and relatives who visited during festivals or family functions, Rajesh appeared caring and responsible. He played the role well, asking Priya about her studies or giving advice about her career. But behind closed doors, there were moments when his temper flared unexpectedly. He would scold Sunita harshly over minor matters, or dismiss Priya's opinions in a tone that left her feeling small. These incidents never lasted long, and life would return to normal quickly, but they left a lingering tension in the house. Despite these undercurrents, the family continued to project an image of togetherness. On weekends, they often went to the local market, where Sunita shopped for vegetables while Rajesh bargained with vendors. Priya would sometimes trail behind, half listening to her mother's chatter and half lost in her own world. In those moments, she wondered if other families lived with the same unease she sometimes felt, or if theirs was different in ways she couldn't fully explain. The Sharma home stood as a symbol of stability in the neighborhood, but within its walls, a silent gap was growing wider each day. Priya could not name it yet, but she sensed something was off, something that would soon unravel their lives in ways she could never imagine. Meera had been part of Priya's life for as long as she could remember. They had grown up together, neighbors first and then inseparable companions. By the time they were teenagers, the two girls were practically sisters. Meera would often stay late at Priya's house, sharing meals with the family, watching television, and joining in the household chores. Sunita adored her and treated her like another daughter, often praising her manners and intelligence. Rajesh, too, seemed fond of her. He would ask about her studies, encourage her ambitions, and occasionally give her advice about the future. At first it all seemed harmless, just a fatherly figure taking interest in his daughter's best friend. Over time, though, Rajesh's behavior toward Meera began to change in subtle ways. He started to linger during their conversations, asking more personal questions than before. His compliments grew warmer, directed at how mature she was becoming or how bright her smile looked. Priya, busy with her own teenage concerns, hardly noticed at first. To her, Meera was safe, trustworthy, and someone she could rely on completely. The idea of betrayal never crossed her mind, but for Rajesh, the lines of appropriate behavior began to blur. Whenever Meera came to visit, he found excuses to stay in the room longer. If she needed a ride home, he volunteered eagerly, even when it was out of his way. He started messaging her privately, under the pretense of checking on her studies or offering career guidance. Meera, young and impressionable, felt flattered by the attention. She had never experienced such focus from an older man, especially someone who carried authority and confidence. What began as innocent conversations slowly turned into secret exchanges filled with promises and admiration. Priya remained oblivious to the growing connection between her stepfather and her best friend. She continued to invite Meera over, often encouraging her to spend weekends at their house. The two girls studied together in Priya's room, laughed over silly jokes, and shared snacks while Sunita cooked in the kitchen. To Priya, everything was normal. She trusted both of them completely. Behind her back, however, Rajesh and Meera were deepening their relationship. Their meetings became more daring, their conversations more intimate. They relied on secrecy, hiding their actions beneath the everyday rhythms of family life. Meera knew it was wrong, but Rajesh's charm and persistence drew her in further. He made her believe she was special, that what they shared was unique and worth the risk. The irony was cruel. Priya, who often confided in Meera about her frustrations with her strict stepfather, never suspected that her best friend was the one person Rajesh was determined to keep closest. The trust Priya placed in both of them became the very shield that allowed the affair to grow unchecked. It was only a matter of time before small cracks began to appear. Priya started noticing that Rajesh's phone buzzed more often when Meera was around. She caught fleeting glances exchanged between them, the kind that seemed to last a second too long. Though she brushed off these thoughts as her imagination, an uneasiness began to creep into her heart. Something was not right. The bond she had always cherished with Meera felt strangely altered, and the once familiar walls of her home began to hide a dangerous secret that would soon change everything. Priya's uneasiness grew stronger with each passing week. At first, she told herself it was just her imagination, that she was overthinking the closeness between her stepfather and her best friend. But little details started to add up, details she could no longer ignore. She noticed how Meera avoided her eyes sometimes when Rajesh entered the room, or how Rajesh's tone softened unnaturally when speaking to Meera. What once felt like harmless fondness now seemed layered with something far more dangerous. Priya tried to brush it away, but her instincts told her that there was a truth waiting to be uncovered. One evening after school, Priya and Meera sat together as usual, studying in her room. Meera seemed distracted, glancing at her phone more than usual. When she left to use the bathroom, she carelessly left her phone on the bed. A message notification flashed across the screen, and Priya's eyes were drawn to it. She hadn't meant to look, but what she saw shook her to her core. It was a message from Rajesh, short, affectionate, and completely out of place. Her heart pounded as she picked up the phone, curiosity overpowering hesitation. With trembling hands, she scrolled through the conversation. Each message confirmed what she had feared. Rajesh and Meera were entangled in something far beyond friendship. Priya felt her chest tighten as the betrayal sank in. Her best friend, the person she trusted more than anyone, had been keeping this secret. Her stepfather, the man who was supposed to protect her mother, had crossed a line that could destroy everything. The words on the screen blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She dropped the phone back on the bed just as Meera returned. Trying to mask her shock, Priya excused herself quickly, locking herself in the bathroom to gather her thoughts. The weight of the discovery pressed down on her like a storm. That night, Priya couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed every memory of Rajesh and Meera together, every smile, every glance she had overlooked. It all made sense now, and the realization cut deep. She felt trapped between anger and heartbreak, unsure of how to process the betrayal. By morning, she had made up her mind to confront Meera. She needed answers. The confrontation came swiftly and without warning. Meeting Meera after school, Priya demanded the truth. At first, Meera denied it, her voice shaky, but under Priya's unrelenting stare, the lies crumbled. Meera admitted everything: how Rajesh had pursued her, how she had been swept up in his attention, and how terrified she was of anyone finding out. Her voice cracked as she begged Priya not to tell anyone, especially Sunita. Priya stood frozen, her anger clashing with sorrow. She couldn't believe the depth of the betrayal, yet her focus shifted quickly to her mother. Sunita had no idea what was happening in her own home, and Priya felt it was her duty to protect her. That night, she resolved to expose Rajesh and put an end to the lies. But Rajesh was already aware that Priya knew too much. The sharpness in her gaze, the coldness in her tone. He could sense the change. The walls he had carefully built around his secret were beginning to crack, and in Priya he saw the greatest threat of all. What Priya believed would save her mother would instead set her on a collision course with danger she could never have predicted. The tension inside the Sharma household became unbearable after Priya's discovery. She could no longer hide her disdain for Rajesh, and though she tried to act normal around her mother, the strain was obvious. Sunita noticed her daughter's sudden change in mood, but assumed it was ordinary teenage frustration. What she didn't know was that Priya was preparing herself to reveal the secret that would shatter their family. Rajesh, however, had already sensed her intentions. Her silence, her piercing stares, and her refusal to engage with him spoke volumes. Every day that passed, he grew more restless, consumed by fear that his double life was about to collapse. He spent sleepless nights pacing the house, replaying possibilities in his head. If Priya told Sunita, his marriage would be ruined. If she told anyone outside, his reputation and business would be destroyed. Every avenue led to disaster, and the root of it all, in his mind, was Priya. He began to see her not as a child under his care, but as an enemy standing in his way. That shift in perspective planted the seed of violence. The opportunity arrived one evening when Sunita left to visit her sister, planning to stay overnight. The house was unusually quiet, with just Rajesh and Priya inside. He watched her move about, noticing the way she avoided his gaze. Determined to end the looming threat, he called her into the living room, saying they needed to talk. Priya entered reluctantly, her guard already raised. The air between them was thick, charged with hostility that neither tried to hide. The conversation began with Rajesh attempting to manipulate her. He spoke of family honor, of the pain her mother would suffer if she learned the truth. He tried to frame her silence as an act of love, insisting that revealing anything would only destroy the person she wanted to protect. But Priya was no longer swayed by his words. She responded firmly, telling him she could not allow the betrayal to continue. Her determination shattered whatever hope Rajesh had left of controlling her. The argument escalated quickly. Rajesh's voice rose, his face twisted with desperation. Priya stood her ground, her resolve unshaken. For the first time, he realized she could not be manipulated, bribed, or intimidated. The panic that had been building inside him transformed into rage. In his mind, she had left him no choice. The moment of violence came suddenly. Fueled by fear and fury, Rajesh lunged at Priya. She struggled, pushing against him, but he was far stronger. His hands found her throat, squeezing as she fought desperately for breath. The struggle was brief but brutal, ending in chilling silence. Priya's body went limp, her eyes still wide with shock. Rajesh stood over her, his chest heaving as the reality of what he had done sank in. He had crossed a line that could never be undone. Panic surged through him again, but now it was accompanied by cold calculation. He needed to erase what had happened. Acting quickly, he wrapped Priya's lifeless body in a bedsheet, his hands trembling as he tied it tightly. He carried her to his car under the cover of night, praying no neighbor would notice. Driving out to the outskirts of the city, he searched for a place where no one would find her. The half-built construction site on a deserted stretch of road seemed perfect. There, in the shallow dirt, he dug frantically with his bare hands until a rough grave took shape. He lowered her body into it, covering her with soil and debris until no trace remained. Standing over the fresh mound, sweat dripping from his face, he convinced himself that the problem was solved. When he returned home, he rehearsed the story he would tell Sunita. Priya had run away after an argument. It was believable enough, he thought, but deep down a chilling fear lingered. He had silenced her voice forever, but the truth had a way of clawing its way back to the surface. Days passed, then weeks, and Priya's absence became impossible to ignore. Sunita's worry turned into desperation as she searched for her daughter everywhere, calling relatives, visiting friends, and even checking hospitals. Each day without news deepened her dread. Rajesh played the part of a concerned stepfather flawlessly. He accompanied Sunita to the police station, filed reports, and reassured her with a calmness that almost convinced everyone. He told neighbors that Priya had left after a disagreement, painting her as a troubled teenager who might have run away. People sympathized, but Sunita knew her daughter too well. Priya was strong-willed, but she was also deeply attached to her mother. She would never vanish without a word. The police launched an investigation, combing through Priya's phone records, her school interactions, and her circle of friends. Slowly, inconsistencies began to appear. Rajesh claimed Priya had stormed out one evening, yet no neighbors recalled seeing her leave. Surveillance cameras from nearby streets failed to show her walking away. Suspicion, subtle at first, began to circle around Rajesh. The calmness he wore so confidently started to look like something else, an act. Meanwhile, Meera carried a burden that grew heavier each day. The affair, once thrilling and intoxicating, now felt like a chain around her neck. She avoided Sunita's calls and stopped visiting the Sharma home altogether. Guilt consumed her, not only for betraying Priya, but also for knowing more than she had admitted. Priya had discovered their secret, and her sudden disappearance felt far too connected. Meera could no longer ignore the voice in her head whispering that Rajesh had something to do with it. Weeks later, investigators questioned Meera directly. At first, she hesitated, terrified of the scandal that would follow if the truth about her and Rajesh came out. But under pressure and haunted by Priya's memory, she finally confessed the affair. She explained how Priya had found out, how angry and determined she had been to tell her mother. Her voice shook as she admitted her fear that Priya's disappearance was no coincidence. The detectives, piecing together her account with Rajesh's suspicious behavior, focused their attention squarely on him. When confronted, Rajesh tried to maintain his innocence, insisting he had nothing to do with Priya's vanishing. But as investigators dug deeper, his story unraveled. Forensic teams found traces of disturbed soil near a construction site on the outskirts of the city. After a tip from locals about unusual activity, the night Priya went missing. The discovery of her shallow grave ended any chance Rajesh had of maintaining his lies. The news shattered Sunita. She collapsed when police informed her that her daughter's body had been found. Her world, once built on the belief that she had secured a safe life for her child, crumbled in an instant. The betrayal cut deeper when she learned about Rajesh's affair with Meera. The man she had trusted to protect her family had destroyed it instead. Rajesh was arrested, his reputation torn to shreds. In court, the evidence was overwhelming. Meera's testimony, the digital messages, the inconsistencies in his statements, and finally, Priya's remains. He was sentenced to life in prison, left to spend his days haunted by the crime he committed in the name of self-preservation. Meera was not charged but carried the guilt like a shadow that never lifted. She lost not only her best friend but also the innocence of her youth, forever tied to a tragedy that stained her life. For Sunita, the loss of her daughter became a wound that time could never heal. The case became known across the city, a reminder of how secrets, lies, and betrayal could spiral into violence that left nothing but ruin in its path.